could take stakes in other U.S. semiconductor companies following its stake in Intel. Hassett explained the reasoning behind the deal in an interview with CNBC today. Listen.
In the end, they worked out a deal where Intel is going to get the CHIPS money, but in exchange, we're going to get some equity. And equity is not voting, so there's not going to be government intrusion into the business of Intel. It's more like a down payment on a sovereign wealth fund, which many, many countries have.
Hassett told CNBC that the Trump administration was considering similar deals in other industries. The 10% Intel investment marks the latest government deal with U.S. companies. Hassett added that money from the CHIPS Act is going out as planned. When asked about government intrusion, Hassett told the network that the administration's move was not unprecedented. Hassett pointed to the government-sponsored mortgage enterprises Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Trump said on Truth Social, quote, "I will make deals like that for our country all day long." And joining us now to discuss the U.S. holding a 10% stake in Intel is Rex Lee, a cybersecurity advisor at My Smart Privacy and tech journalist. Good to see you again, Rex. So to start off here, what do you think? What does it mean for the U.S. government to own 10% of Intel? We know Intel has been struggling to a degree, right? Is this move more of a bailout, a strategic investment, maybe?
Yes, it's definitely a strategic investment because Intel's chip manufacturing infrastructure is mostly in the United States versus NVIDIA and AMD that rely on chip manufacturing in Taiwan. So from a strategic point of view and a national security point of view, it's a good investment in the company. From a commercial investment, Intel is far behind NVIDIA, who has a market valuation of $3 trillion, with AMD closing gaps due to their powerful M1 300 accelerators. They're not far behind, plus investments from Microsoft in AMD put them far ahead of Intel in terms of commercial markets. Today, Intel's market cap is right at about $108 billion, so they're far behind.
Okay, so there have been reports of Intel's CEO having connections with Beijing, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, Rex, but I remember Trump was suggesting as well that the CEO might have to resign. So the latest comments from Trump says that the CEO walked in wanting to get a job, keep his job, and he ended up giving the U.S. $10 billion. Is there a reversal here from Trump?
Yeah, this is a little questionable regarding Lip Bhutan's background. He mainly invested in Chinese companies that are tied to the CCP and PLA in China. So does he have a direct connection to the CCP? That remains unknown at this point, but he definitely had investments in companies that had ties to the Chinese government, CCP, and so forth. So one of the big risks here is the fact that like AMD and NVIDIA, Alphabet, Google, Google's parent company, Microsoft, and Apple, a lot of the IP that Intel designs into their chips, they actually sell their chips to Chinese companies like everybody else. You have to, to compete in today's global market, you have to sell into the Chinese market. And there are some risks there regarding the technology to end up in the hands of the CCP and the Chinese military through China's civil military fusion program. However, there are some guardrails in place today regarding that. So regarding this deal, there's some clawback regarding the government's investment that if technology does end up in the hands of the Chinese military through the civil military fusion program, then the government can actually claw back their investment in Intel.
All right, so in terms of chip makers, earlier you mentioned AMD. There's also NVIDIA, there is TSMC, the Taiwanese chip maker. Can you talk to us about how relevant Intel is, how important Intel is important to national security, U.S. national security?
Well, Intel is important because they have they sell into the DoD through their RAMP and SI ship programs. So they're heavily involved with the military in terms of being a military contractor regarding their chips. So I think regarding this deal versus NVIDIA and AMD, for example, there's much more exposure with NVIDIA and AMD regarding the technology ending up in the hands of the Chinese military through their civil military fusion program. Although the guardrails that were set in that deal really aren't as strict as this deal, meaning that with NVIDIA in particular and AMD, they can sell older generations of their GPU chips to China, but not the latest GPU chips. However, the older generations enable the Chinese app developers and military to be able to develop generative AI and generate AI chatbots that can induce the ELIZA effect, which is a humanization of the AI, which is a huge concern, as we heard over the last week regarding Meta's AI chatbots and their child policy, where parents and the medical community is concerned about children being manipulated by these AI chatbots. Well, imagine this technology in the hands of the Chinese military regarding unrestricted tech-based hybrid warfare or psychological warfare and so forth. So there's a lot more exposure from the NVIDIA and AMD deal than there is for the Intel deal. I think it's important for the U.S. government to preserve Intel's IP and Intel's capability to manufacture chips in America. They have the infrastructure to do it today, and they can catch up pretty fast in terms of their AI. They just fell behind because they underestimated the GPU chip market many years ago, and they've been struggling to catch up with NVIDIA and AMD ever since.
Do you think this move will then make Intel more competitive with government buying, 10% stake in its equities?
Yes, again, it's a good deal. It's different than providing grants like in the 2008 bailouts, financial bailouts, even though that money was eventually paid back. This actually, motivates Intel and enables the government to profit from stocks. So Intel is going to be forced to make better decisions and become more profitable. The only thing that remains unseen is how does the taxpayer benefit from this? There's no announcement that there's going to be any tax rebate for these types of deal to the taxpayer, because it's the taxpayer's money that's going to fund these investments like AMD and NVIDIA and now Intel and other companies that where the government can invest in those companies. What's the return for the taxpayer in terms of when these companies are highly profitable and there's billions, if not trillions of dollars coming back into the treasury? Will the government provide a tax credit or rebate back to the taxpayer for the investment of their tax dollars? Again, this is different than a grant. This is no different than you or I investing in these companies. And in fact, if you are paying taxes, it is you and I investing in these companies through the government. So that remains to be unseen, how the taxpayer at the end of the day is going to benefit from this.
Right. I mean, you make a great point there, Rex. And on the other side of that is, if Intel continues to struggle and its stock loses value, does that mean that the U.S. government is risking losing billions of taxpayer dollars?
Yes, exactly. That's, again, from a strategic standpoint, it's an investment of necessity. It really is. But, unlike a grant where the company may be forced to pay that back regardless of whether they're profitable or not, like the 2008 bailouts, yes, it's no different than you or I buying the stock. The government's at risk if Intel stock continues to go south. They need to catch up. For this to be a commercially successful investment, they have to catch up to AMD and NVIDIA because they're far behind. At $108 billion market cap today versus $3 trillion market cap, that the gap is tremendous between the AI chip manufacturing leaders like AMD and NVIDIA versus where Intel's at.
Okay, Rex, just one last question. We're seeing now the U.S. government take equity in Intel, rare earth companies, even demand revenue shares from NVIDIA, AMD. Is that all a coincidence? Is there a trend emerging?
Well, we hear that the trend for this is national security. Again, I have to argue the point. Well, if this is about national security, then why are we allowing these companies to even sell even older generational chips to China that can be weaponized by China? You know, again, this stems back to the monopoly that Google, Apple, and Microsoft have over the operating system market. All AI-infused apps and platforms today have to be developed to support the Android OS, Apple iOS, or Microsoft Windows operating systems so that those apps can be distributed globally. So for Chinese companies to compete globally with all the other app developers in the world, whether they're developing social media or they're developing defense-grade technology or cybersecurity technology through these apps that support our smartphones, our tablet PCs, and our PCs, they all have to rely on Google, Apple, and Microsoft for global distribution, where Google, Apple, and Microsoft profit whether apps developed in America are number one in the App Store or apps developed in China are number one. So there's a consequence to all this that nobody's really looked at in regards to competition around the world. If you go back and look at the number one internet companies 10 years ago, the number one internet companies in the world, 7 of them were from the United States. Today, and 4 of them were from China. Today, it's almost reversed. 6 are from China and 4 are from the United States. So, you know, even though China's not attacking us through their military, we're not in a shooting war with China where they can weaponize the technology against our military, they can most certainly weaponize this technology to have a competitive edge economically. So if you look at economic warfare, they're winning because they have the most powerful internet companies in the world. Most of them are coming from China these days rather than the United States.
Some great points there, Rex. I wish we had more time to get into it, but unfortunately, that's all we have for today. Thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
British goods containing steel and aluminum face 25% tariffs as of this weekend just gone.